Okay, we're now going to try and finish this overview of the manual retopology tools in the Retopo room of 3D Coat by starting with the cap tool. Now, we briefly touched on it in another video regarding closing off an end, such as this claw here. We use the strokes tool just to create a few loops. Created one cross section, hit enter, and now this is a good situation where you would want to use the cap tool to close the end off. Now you actually have the ability to create just one large end-gon if you so choose, instead of a group of triangles like this, by holding the shift key. In this case, triangles will work best, so I'll just click that. I can use split rings to add some reinforcing edge loops, especially here at the end, and then just switch to slide edges. And here you can see by default you're just sliding one edge. In this case, I want to slide an entire edge loop, so I can slide it all the way down toward the end. Okay, so that's one application for it. Another is a rather tricky situation whenever you're working with a mouth socket or maybe an eye socket, something like that. Obviously, a lot of geometry is obscuring your view, so that it makes it a bit hard to model the geometry inside. So let's see how we might use the cap tool to work in this case. I'm first going to start off with the strokes tool. I'm going to hold the control key and just lay down some points here along the eyelid. And I'll adjust this point real quick. Alright, so I'm going to create another loop here. I'm just going to freeform this one. And you want to make sure that you have enough spline points density. On some models or some areas where you're working, it may be so small that you need to bump up the spline points density, because if I had 100 here, it wouldn't be enough. So let me undo that one time. If I crank it back down to 100, you can see it's pretty crude. It's okay, but a lot of times when you hit enter, you'll get nothing, and it's largely because of the spline points density. So I'll crank that back up. And if you create too many, then when you try to go back and adjust some of these points, you give yourself a little bit too much work. So you want to try and find a happy medium. So I'll just hold the control key and just click individual points. And for demonstration purposes, it doesn't have to look too pretty. Okay. So one thing I can do is come inside and do the same thing with the control key. Just lay down about 8 points here. Create a crude inner circle. And I'll create one right on the edge of the inner portion of the eyelid as well. Click this one point, connect it with the other. Now it's welded. Hold the control key, continue clicking. I can readjust this by clicking a point and readjusting it. Select this one, bring it over the top of the other, and release, and it should connect it back up. Okay. So let's try and create a single cross section here, and the number of segments is 12 by default. I'll choose 16 and hit enter. And I was missing a few right here, but that's fine. I can just connect these up here using the same tool. Okay, so now I can try split rings. And maybe try one more right here just to kind of reinforce this edge. And what I'm going to do is choose the cap tool to close this off, just like I would the end of a fingertip or a horn, a tooth, something like we just did. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is use the brush tool, and this is a pretty straightforward tool here. Just hold the shift key to smooth. And I'm just kind of tapping the areas I want to smooth. I could click relax, and that might work, but I'm somewhat wary of doing that because whenever you have edges like this sitting on a very sharp corner, such as the eyelids like this, where they're tight, very close to one another, it can cause you some issues. But let me just undo that. I'll split rings, and that too is another straightforward tool, and I can just continue to add more geometry if I need it. Okay, so I think that will conclude the cap tool. I do want to show one other quick tip I think could be helpful in some circumstances. For example, you saw that I was having to kind of walk a tightrope with the strokes tool, so I'll undo a few times. Okay, so as you can see, if I needed to put another stroke here, all this other geometry around it is somewhat obscuring my ability to place a stroke here or additional strokes. So one thing you could do, a little neat little trick when you run into circumstances like this where you have a really tough portion of your geometry that you want to get to, is you can go to the voxel room and you can choose to hide a portion of the mesh. In this case, I'm going to go into orthographic view, side view, zoom in, and I'll choose surface hide. In the E panel, just choose either circle or elliptical. click in the center. I want to encompass the area where I think the eye socket probably stops. And you're probably saying to yourself, wait a minute, I want to hide everything else, not this. That's fine, because what we're going to do is invert this. Okay, and so I'm going to come out of orthographic view. And now, because I was able to hide everything, I can easily access these areas, even in the Retopo room. So we could come in here and start outside on one end to outside on the other and create quick loops this way. Okay. And I can even create an additional one right here on the end. Hit the Enter key. And there you go. Go back to the Caps tool. Brush. Looks good. Split rings. And looks like we're missing a little bit of geometry right here. We can always patch that up. The points and faces. Right click. When we see the preview that we like, right click. Same thing here. And it's easy as that. Okay, so the other thing I want to point out is delete polygons is pretty straightforward. Just deleting individual polygons as you go. Clicking on them. I'll undo. And delete edges is a very handy one whenever you're trying to clean up auto retopo results. A lot of times you'll have an excessive number of edges on certain parts of your model, so you can just quickly go in and delete either individual edges or choose edge loops, and it also allows you, like on the outer edge like this, if you want to delete the entire row of polygons. Obviously if you delete that, just delete all of those polygons there. So yeah, and you can choose edge rings if you so choose. And the next thing we want to look at is move vertices. It actually should be renamed move elements, because that's what you have here is different sub-elements such as vertices, edges, faces, edge loops, edge rings, and so on. The auto mode is really rather handy because no matter what you hover over, you can go ahead and manipulate it on the fly and then quickly hover over another sub-object. But you want to make sure that your brush radius is not so large that it's encompassing multiple vertices like this. Okay, if you want to be able to select individual vertices, you can use your bracket keys to reduce your brush size. Okay, hover over an edge, manipulate that, hover over a polygon, likewise. Really cool. And then you can switch to any one of these sub-object modes here. Now, if you're used to using hotkeys to switch between these sub-objects, you can assign hotkeys that are identical to what you may be using in your typical 3D application like Maya, 3D Studio Max, Softimage, Lightwave, Modo, and so on. Okay, so I know in 3ds Max I have 1, 2, and 4 And so by hovering over it and hitting the End key, you can go ahead and assign the desired hotkey to it. Okay, I'm going to hit Escape because I don't want to reassign it. Okay, so collapse is the last thing. The thing about this is if you are in like an edge loop or edge ring mode in another tool, for some reason this collapse will adopt that same orientation. What I need to do is come out of this, go back to collapse, and you can see I'm back into single edge mode. Okay, pretty cool. Okay, so what we've covered thus far is the add and split tool. We covered the select tool at some length, the quads tool, points and faces, caps, strokes tool, and the brush tool as well. And then we looked at all of these tweak operations here. And the command section will change based on the tool you have selected, so it's somewhat contextual. Okay, if you're in select, depending on what you have selected, a lot of tools will open up to you or may not be visible at all, so you want to be careful about that. If you're in edges mode, you have a number of tools that open up to you, such as spin, or spin back, spin, and extrude is a pretty strange tool. Let me go ahead and select edge loop, and I'll just hit delete, and it will, oops, I'm going to do that. When I switch to faces, okay, now it will delete all those polygons. And I'm going to just brush select all of these polygons, delete them, and go back to edges mode. And so extrude it's very similar to the quads tool actually, so you can strip model very quickly. Click, select first, then extrude. Now you can come over and continue to work. Hit escape and do that a few times. Hit escape to drop the tool. Select an edge again. Edge loop. And now extrude. And so this is actually a good tool to use on a finger or something, but not necessarily in a flat area like this. Okay, in order to look at some of these other options here, I'm going to go ahead and unhide the rest of the model here. Go to the voxel room, under the voxel menu, and just click unhide all. Go back to the Retopo room, and I'm going to go ahead and select all the faces on this layer. Clicking this little icon. Hit the delete key. And I'll just create some geometry here with the points and faces tool. Right click, just plot out some more polygons here. Right click over vertice to kind of tweak its position. Right click, and so on. Okay, so Again, you have some hidden tools that are available to you. If I am in faces mode, I select the face, can choose normal extrude. And if you're trying to model something like armor or whatnot on top of a model, and then bring this back into the Retopo room to sculpt on, maybe sculpt some battle damage or something like that, this is a good tool to utilize. Okay, so let me undo. I'll hit escape to drop the tool, undo. And then you have free extrude. Which is very much like working with the Inset tool in 3ds Max or the Extrude tool in Maya. So that's very straightforward. Also, select edges. Okay, and now when I try the Bevel tool, okay, it bevels, or it extrudes basically inwardly and outwardly as well. So let me use the Move Vertices tool and select vertices. Check and make sure I don't have extra overlapping vertices or anything. Okay. The reason why I wonder why is because I've got these different colors of polygons. It shouldn't be. Let me select all faces. Quite strange. Fair enough. And then you have tools. When you have faces selected, you have some tools here as well. You can clone a selection, an entire mesh, or selected polygons, and you can move it just like you would in any 3D application, scale it, rotate it, and so on. And when you hit the Enter key, it's going to ask, do you want to snap it to the voxel object? In this case, no. And it will create a new layer, a new cloned layer. Okay. So subdivide is self-explanatory, and as well as hide and invert hidden and unhide. Okay, and let's go back to edges. You have select sharp. You can set the crease angle. In this case, I don't really have any, but if you had kind of a box-like object or an object with sharp edges along an area like this around the eyebrow, extending on both sides, it probably would select the edges in this area. So let's give that a try. Create some more polygons here. Select this layer. And Okay. So go back to the select tool, edges selected, select sharp. There you go. And also you have the ability to take a selection that you have here and create UV seams if you like. Speaking of which, there is one last tool I wanted to mention, and that is select path. And in a previous video we looked at working with UVs, and when we covered the UV path, it has an identical counterpart or identical sibling in function to UV path, except with UV path, as you might guess, it selects UV seams, whereas select path selects edges on a mesh. And you could work interchangeably, okay, by selecting edges like this, and again choose select seams. Yeah, select path. So I can click my initial point, click a second one, and just kind of drag it and see a preview as I'm dragging. I just hit enter and it commits it to a selection. Okay, and again I can choose select seams, and now I have no UV seams on this particular mesh. And with that, we'll conclude this overview of the manual retopology tools in 3D Coat. In the next video, we're going to merge everything to the paint room and start doing some texture work. So stay tuned.